Yes. Hello. Welcome to a class on what somatic therapy is. We're going to dig into that. It's probably, I don't know. I like a lot of the things I do in work, but this is up there. I'm pretty passionate about it. So I'm excited to do this class and teach you a little bit more about it. As I mentioned, my name is Brooke Size. I'm just recently got my LCPC license. So I'm a licensed clinical professional counselor. I was an LPC, licensed professional counselor. Um, I'm a somatic experiencing practitioner, and I'm also IFM certified and board certified in holistic nutrition. So have a private practice in Prairie Village, Kansas, where I see individuals and couples for therapy and also do functional medicine work and nutrition work with folks. Um, oh, here's who I help. I forgot I had a slide on this, but work with anxiety. With somatic work, it is often, sometimes we call it trauma therapy or body based therapy. So, somatic work is really great for things like PTSD, trauma in general, all different types of trauma. So, those are probably two main areas that I see. Also, work with people with anxiety, chronic pain, and then it shifts over into kind of things that are manifesting physically, whether it was due to trauma or it's just dealing with a more physical issue like IBS or IBD, some hormone issues like PMS, PMDD, PCOS. Also see some people for emotional eating or binge and disordered eating, as well as couples and intimacy therapy. And that sounds like a wide range of things. This class will sort of explain why, to me, usually using functional nutrition or functional medicine approaches and also somatic therapy approaches are also actually really helpful for all these areas, even though they seem like sort of a broad range of areas. So, we're going to talk about what somatic therapy is, how it differs from other types of therapy like cognitive behavioral therapy or talk therapy. And then we'll get into somatic experiencing is a training. So, you might hear that if you hear somebody does, like, I'm an SEP, that means a somatic experiencing practitioner. And this is, we'll talk about what that is, and then also get into some strategies and some um, techniques that you can use at home. So you'll have some takeaways as well. So, somatic therapy is a form of body centered therapy. It looks at the mind body connection. So, instead of just looking at kind of our thoughts and behaviors and our feelings and emotions, we're also looking at what is happening in the body and what's the felt sense in the body. There's a lot of different mind body approaches that are pulled into somatic therapy. So you might meet a somatic therapist who is also a yoga teacher. Like, I'm a 500-hour registered yoga teacher. I haven't taught yoga for a decade, but I pull in sometimes things that I used to use in yoga into somatic therapy. You might meet a massage therapist who also does somatic work, or a body worker, acupuncturist. So, because it's addressing the mind body connection, you'll see a lot of different practitioners that do somatic work. Part of it is releasing pent up tension that negatively affects physical and emotional well being, which is why many of us might work with people who have chronic pain. Like, one area that is something that is probably a good fit for my practice, for example, is somebody who says, I had a lot of childhood trauma, and now I have this autoimmune disease, and I'm trying to work on all of it. Or I went through this one day traumatic thing that happened in an afternoon, and it was this really traumatic thing. And now I've developed this physical issue. And so when it's all connected, and I think oftentimes, there are things that can be just more physical or just more emotional, for example. But also, we're always looking at, like, where does all this tie in and how can we support whatever needs support. Somatic experiencing, I mentioned, and that refers to a training that's offered by the Somatic Experiencing Institute. It's a 3-year training with continued education after that. It's probably the association I'm the most involved with of the various things that I do. Kansas City has a really strong somatic therapy group of people, and therapists, which is really neat. So we also put on summits a couple times a year where you can go and you can, if you're interested in this, I can direct you towards like the Kansas City somatic kind of world, and there's more trainings and education and classes from all of the people involved with that. Um, Part of what the training does is it teaches practitioners to resolve symptoms of stress, shock, and trauma that accumulate in our bodies. So there's a lot of assessing for where we get stuck in fight, flight, or freeze, and then helping to recover or move through those states to build more resilience. And I'm going to talk a lot more about that and explain what that means. Um, but it's a body-oriented therapeutic model. It's applied in multiple professions and professional settings, as I mentioned. You might find it in psychotherapy. You might find it in, I've been in trainings with people who are ER nurses. They want to make sure that they're more trauma informed if people get injured and end up in the ER. All kinds of different areas where we can use this in the world. There was an attorney in one of the trainings I was assisting, which is really cool. And it was an attorney who is the person that a kiddo has to go talk to when they've been removed from an unsafe home. And she said, I only get 15 minutes with the kid before we have to go talk to the judge. And that is a really traumatic moment for that child. And this person said that in that 15 minutes, using somatic therapy in that moment, it's actually really regulating. And even in 15 minutes, it can be helpful. So I thought that was really cool. So used in a lot of different environments. Um, let's see. So I wanted to say, just before we go to the next slide, a little bit of the science, and then we'll get into more of it. Trauma may begin as acute stress from a perceived life threat, or it can be the end of cumulative stress. So I probably see more people that have accumulative stress from childhood. So developmental trauma is a lot of times how we refer to that. And it can be, I hear this a lot. People say, well, compared to like this other person who went through this big thing, I had like mostly loving caregivers, and I can't say there was a big major thing that happened, but these little, like, it's like little cuts for 20 years can add up. And so that would be more accumulated stress, or there can be like an actual perceived life threatening situation that was very traumatic and shorter lived. Trauma can result from a variety of stressors such as accidents, invasive medical procedures, sexual or physical assault, emotional abuse, neglect, war, natural disasters, loss, birth trauma, uh, corrosive stressors of ongoing fear and conflict. And so somatic therapy is really good for all of those types of trauma. And some people might work more with one area or another. The triune brain is something I want to kind of explain before we get into understanding more how it works. So, and this will help us understand like what is the difference between kind of talking about my life and what's going on versus doing more of a body-based approach to working through life, or physical ailments. So the triune brain is referring to three parts of our brain. We've got our cortex, and I often just call this the thinking brain, right? This is the part that makes us human. It is where we make meaning, where we have insight about things. It's story. When you sit and you tell a story about something that happened, this is your cortex, online, remembering and able to tell that story about something that happened in the past. It's where we intellectualize. It's where we have verbal language, conscious thought, self-awareness. So the things up here we are aware of, we know, we can share, and we can make meaning out of it. Then and I think in our culture, being human, this is very, we fall back on this a lot. and what's the word I want to use? Maybe seen a lot in our, um, it's considered important to be able to do that to some degree. So, it's kind of like the kid who can sit there and talk to adults and say, oh, this is what happened at school. And here's why. A lot of adults might look at that kid and go, wow, like what a great, smart human. And the other kid who doesn't have a lot of words, sometimes that's a little bit harder, but they may have another part of their brain that's they're more attuned to, and it's also maybe working really well. So I just want to name that because I see that happen a lot in with clients in terms of being able to intellectualize or not. It can be a good thing, and it can also get in our way. The middle brain is the limbic system part of our brain. That's the language of emotion and feeling tone. So I just call that like the emotional brain is a good way to remember it. Um, that's where we have implicit memory. It's where we have our emotional experience living in there. So as we tell a story and we start to feel angry about it, we're getting into that emotional brain, that limbic system. Then there's back here. This is the automatic brain. It's really important. It's something we spend more time with in somatic therapy. In talk therapy, it's all mostly up here and middle brain. And in somatic work, we're using those, but we're also really trying to access the lower brain. Also referred to as the reptilian brain. This is where we have our instinctive responses. It is the language of this part of the brain is our sensory information. So a way to describe this is if we're driving on the highway and someone pulls in front of us, we don't think up here in our cortex, oh, a car pulled in front of me. I should put my foot on the brake, right? That would be too slow. We would have hit the car already. So it's down here that sensed some car moving. We saw it or we felt it. There was some sensory input that let us know that something was moving in front of us, and our foot just automatically went to the brake. And then we might feel like the wash of adrenaline that makes us go, why did that person fall in front of us? And our limbic goes online and we feel angry, maybe. And then up here we go, oh, maybe they just didn't see me. It's okay. And then we might calm down, or maybe like, somebody gets really mad and flicks them off. I don't know what the response is, but we make meaning out of it somehow. And that's when that information finally made it to our cortex and we could process it. But this is our automatic fast response, and it isn't making meaning out of it. In our lower brain, we are identifying the sensory input coming in, and the memory stored there is sensory patterns. So if you've ever walked into a room and it felt weird and you thought, I don't feel comfortable in this room, that's some pattern of sensory input that was stored in your lower brain that then you just felt kind of weird when you walked in that room or uneasy, right? We don't know why that would be up here, but we just know we felt it. And that's down here. So the only way to access this part of the brain is through our felt sense, I should say, not even just felt sense, but through our senses, through our sight, what we hear, what we feel in our body. It's through the present moment of what's coming in is how we access that part of the brain. So to get into where somatic therapy came from, we're going to talk a little bit about polyvagal theory, because this is what kind of informed the start of somatic therapy and somatic experiencing. So polyvagal, it's based on the science of the nervous system, and it was first developed in the 1990s by Stephen Porges. And this was developed to explain the science of connection and a map of the nervous system to guide our exploration, as well as skills that can be practiced to anchor ourselves in each other, in safety, and in balance. and in ourselves, and to be able to identify connection to self and connection to others and find safety. There's a person who does a lot of like training for therapists and has some good books out on polyvagal theory. Her name is Deb Dana, and she wrote Polyvagal Theory in Therapy. She also wrote a book called Anchored, which I think is good for the general public, not just like practitioners. So if you want a book on polyvagal theory, Anchored is the name of it. Polyvagal theory, I love this quote. It's the science of feeling safe enough to fall in love with life and take the risks of living. Because if we can feel safe and feel love with ourselves and others, then we can go out and we can take the risks of living, right? But if we're always in kind of fight or flight or in a state of fear, it's hard to live, and it's pretty hard to take risks in life. This is the science. Polyvagal theory was the science that Peter Levine, he's the creator of Somatic Experiencing, started studying in the 70s, and then created the Somatic Experiencing Institute, and then started training people in somatic work. And I would say Somatic Experiencing really like fueled somatic therapy. But you might see people who aren't trained in that, but they've got like various other types of trainings in somatic work or polyvagal theory. Um, I also often say that part of what somatic work can help with is befriending your nervous system and befriending the nervous systems around one. And we'll talk about a little bit more of that here. There are 3 essential elements in polyvagal theory. And oops, I'm looking for my notes too. Context, choice, and connection. So context is, how do we communicate expectations, um, reason things out, have resources. Choice, what do we have control over and what do we don't have control over in our bodies or with our environment. And connection is, what does that look like in this moment? Is it something we do, a gentle head nod, a verbal acknowledgement, a non-threatening posture? Like, how am I in my body and able to connect? 3 organizing principles of polyvagal theory. There's co-regulation, and this is kind of a fun one, I think, to talk about, because this word really came out of teaching parents how to co-regulate with children. But it's something that we do in relationship with colleagues, with our friends, with in intimate romantic relationships, is co-regulation. And so I want to explain it because I think it gets confused. I've even had some friends, when I talk about it, say, well, if you're co-regulating, is that like codependency? Am I not able to regulate myself? And it's really different. Um, with a parent or an adult to a child, co-regulation is more the work of the parent, because children don't know how to regulate yet. And so if we're regulating our own stress response, and what that looks like is, I'm going to use it like an example from my house. My 7-year-old reached across the table the other day. She's in a bad habit of kind of just like, I think it's a way to get attention. She'll reach over and just like take something from someone else's plate to try it, right? Or grab like a fizzy water and drink it when it's not hers. And I saw like one of her brothers just like kind of like, oh, like get so mad, right? And it's annoying to me too, but she doesn't really, it's my job as a parent, right, to teach her. And even though my response might be frustrated because we've talked about this and it is, could elicit an anger response, the work is to go, oh, I feel my anger rising. I'm going to take a deep breath, and then I'm going to look at her, and I'm going to be the calm one to say, that's not okay. And let's try that again. What would be a different way to pick up the cup, right? Or to ask if you can have a sip of my drink. That would be one person co-regulating themselves to support the process of the other person, which happens a lot when it's, parenting or teacher to student or something like that, or maybe a therapist to a client. The supportive process with two people is that we can't co-regulate if we don't know how to regulate ourselves. So part of the work is really learning to regulate ourselves and our own stress response. And then we're able to do that with someone else. But when it happens together, it's a really beautiful thing when two people are doing that and able to show up to help the partner or the friend regulate. So defined, it's the supportive process, um, let's see, of regulatory support that it can occur within the context of caring relationships across the lifespan. And it can look different with different people. But I love this quote, Maya Angelou: people won't remember what you said, they won't remember what you did, but they will remember how you made them feel. And that is very much a good explanation of co-regulation. Your nervous system meets my nervous system, and there's a new nervous system created between us. So I don't know if you have someone in your life that, you can kind of think through if this resonates with someone you know. Have you ever been with someone and felt a shift in the mood? You've noticed a change in the dynamic between you and someone else without really knowing why. And what that is, and hopefully with some people it feels positive. Like, oh, I thought I was, doing fine, or maybe not fine, but I was just kind of taking care of it. And then I'm in connection with this other person and I feel really held or really relaxed, or it feels really good. That's co-regulation. It's the way that the nervous system of one individual influences the nervous system of another. It's probably also happened. I've had this happen with people that are family that I love deeply, but when I'm around them, I feel really dysregulated. And it's kind of hard. I have to work really hard to like feel myself staying, in the way I felt before they walked in the room. Has nothing to do with how much I care for them or love them, but there's something about their nervous system that like feels really difficult for mine. And so it takes more work to regulate myself. And then there's other people, they walk in the room and I'm like, wow, this feels so good to be in the same room with this person. It's like sunlight, it's nourishing. So that's what's happening there. It's co-regulation with our system and another system. Hopefully we're regulating. Sometimes it feels more dysregulating, but it's a combination of nervous systems coming together. We see it with animals, right? You walking a dog down the street and it has a different response to different animals. Its lower brain is like, I don't like that one. That one's cool. That's what's happening. So it's an interpersonal process, but it's also a neurological and biological process that we don't entirely have control over. The idea behind this, if it's in relationship, is that one person isn't generating another person's feelings, and they're not responsible for them. We're all responsible for our own, but the awareness that we are affecting one another in important, real, and unconscious ways. And humans are pack animals. We aren't meant to live in isolation. Relationship is everything. And so understanding co-regulation is a really important thing because we can become aware of the interplay between our system and other people's systems, and ultimately find better ways to self-regulate or find the people that feel right, feel good, develop positive relationships. Not to mention, of course, like healing from traumas and other past experiences. So neuroception, describes how the neural circuits distinguish whether situations or people are safe, dangerous, or life-threatening. So when I said that example of walking into a store and going, I love this store, it feels so good, I feel great in here, versus walking into a store and feeling a little like, I don't know, this doesn't feel right. Maybe it's just a little unpleasant, or maybe it's actually feels uneasy. That's neuroception at work. We're detecting something without actual real awareness about what it is, but our lower brain is picking up some things. Neuroception is primitive. It's generated by parts of the brain, the lower brain, right, that haven't evolved much earlier than our conscious minds, or that did evolve much earlier than our conscious mind. And all living species with a nervous system carry neuroception. So babies, who have not yet developed spinal cords and brains have neuroception. It operates outside of our cognitive awareness. I have this chart in my office and I pull it out a lot with clients. So it is, I think, I like using this. It's a helpful chart to kind of see, okay, so we've learned there's this thing called somatic therapy, right? It is body based. It has to do with our stress in navigating our stress response in life. And we have neuroception where we're sensing the world around us and we're sensing the people around us and having some sort of meeting of nervous systems and regulating or not regulating. And so then these are the three parts. You've probably heard of parasympathetic nervous system and sympathetic, right? Parasympathetic, we often refer to as rest and digest. It's the place where we feel more relaxed. And sympathetic as fight or flight, the place where we feel more stressed or activated. There's actually on this chart, the top, the red, and the green on the bottom are both parasympathetic, but they're two really different places in our system. And we'll get into that. When someone walks into my office and I can kind of like get a sense for how maybe they feel in their system, I can't always tell if they're red or green at first, but it does show up pretty quickly. But that's because in their system, they might seem really relaxed. In the yellow, we're a little more active. We're talking a little faster. Usually I can tell we're a little more activated. So the green is our social engagement system. And it's probably worth pointing out that all the muscles of our face are really connected to our ventral vagal or social engagement system, because that's how we orient with people, right? We smile or we frown or we like, there's all these little muscles that are going to tell our nervous system what's going on in our back and forth with another person or our environment. This is where if we are in green, think of this as present and we have some capacity. If you are reading a book and enjoying your alone time and reading, and someone comes up and says, "Excuse me, I have a question," you're less likely to feel annoyed at being interrupted if you're in the green. You might feel like, "Oh, okay, yeah, I can take a minute. What's going on?" If we're in the red, we probably might feel a little like, I don't want to be interrupted right now because I don't really have the energy to help you with whatever it is you need. I really want to be just checked out, or maybe losing myself in this book or in my phone. So the green, we have capacity, we feel safe, we feel present. We would probably usually we could feel our body a little bit better. Meaning like we have access to like, oh yeah, I feel relaxed in my legs. I can feel the bottom of my feet on the floor. I can feel my back on the chair. And I feel settled, grounded. I'm able to be curious. That's a big one. And that's important because if somebody gets mad at you and you're in the green, we're less likely to be defensive. We'd have more capacity to go, whoa, you're really angry. Can you tell me why? If we're in the yellow or the red, we'll have less capacity. We might get more defensive or shut down or, have a different response. And then you can see it's probably kind of small on your screen, but if you look to the right, it tells you more what's happening in the physical body in these states. So in this green area in ventral vagal, we are digesting, we have intestinal motility, food is moving through the digestive tract, our immune system's working well, not overacting, not underacting. Hopefully we have more resistance to infection, good circulation. We're able to get some oxytocin release because we're able to feel pleasure here. We're able to feel joy. We're able to feel optimistic when we're in this green area. As we get activated, and it's normal to go through all of these states. We might go through all of these states in a day or a week. Sleep is technically a checkout response, right? We all need to sleep. So that's in the red, is more like I'm ready to be done with the day. It's time to shut my eyes and sleep. And that's a dorsal vagal state. The yellow is fight or flight. Some people go more towards the fight side, some people go more towards the flight side. Flight would be more worry, concern, anxiety, panic, fear. Fight is frustration, irritation, anger, rage, ready to go, ready to, be more aggressive. And but it's all in the same place in the nervous system. It just depends more kind of like how that manifests in our limbic, right? In our emotional state and what our body wants to do with that. As kids, if we are threatened, we're going to want to run first. That's usually the initial stress response because we're small. And if we can get away, or with adults, if we can run away, then there's no bodily harm, right? We get away and we can find safety. Second response usually is to fight. Third response is freeze. That doesn't mean as adults living through life, we've been, I know I've had like clients who said, well, my dad always told me to fight. If someone threatens me, you fight. And so they sometimes in doing somatic work, what we identify the body wanted to do in that situation was run away. But the intellectual brain was like, don't run, you fight. So the body had to suppress the impulse to run and fight instead. And so actually, when we're unraveling the trauma from that, it's actually allowing the body to run or to imagine what it would have been like to escape and just run away and hide and not have to do that. So we have our life experience and messaging that we've gotten from our family or society or school about what we should do. And then we have what our body actually might have wanted to do. And that looks different for different people. The freeze. So in fight or flight, we're going to get an increase in blood pressure, increase in heart rate, adrenaline, oxygen going out to vital organs so that we can do what we need to do to find safety or to get away or to fight. In life in society now, right, we can be in fight or flight and we're not actually like gonna run away and we're not actually gonna fight, but we can stay in this space of activation throughout the day if we're stressed at work or stressed with something going on in our life. There's this kind of high stress, right? So I always say, like, up at the top of the yellow is kind of this place that's like deer in the headlights. Like, if you imagine deer in the headlights, it's kind of like braced, like I can't move, but I'm like highly activated. So I call that functional freeze. And that's another place sometimes people learn to live in their body. Like, if life experiences led one to feel like it's not safe to relax because every time I relax, something bad happens. So I've just learned to be constantly vigilant. And there's an activation in that, right? Like it's a friend described to me like sort of like a duck on the water, but the feet are paddling as fast as they can. That's a good image for functional freeze. Like, I'm cool. It's good. We're going to be okay. We're fine. On the outside, we might look really relaxed, but inside, there's a lot of activation happening. Um, I can share that I definitely, through my own somatic therapy in life, realized that up through my 20s, I was that, right? Like everybody around me would have been like, Brooke is so relaxed and calm. And I was like, I don't feel that way inside. It's changed over time, but that's an area that, just to describe, because I see that a lot too in practice. The difference between the yellow and the red is that yellow is I can. So usually we feel like I can do something about this. Like I can worry about it. I can go like talk to this person and tell them what I think, or I could just like work as hard as I can all day and get it done. So it can feel good to be there for some people. Some people like to live in the yellow because there's a feeling of like control. I have some control over what's happening, even though I might feel really stressed and activated, like I can do something about it. When we hit into the red, if you've ever hit that point, this is where burnout happens. So burnout is in the red, depression is in the red, exhaustion, chronic fatigue can be in the red. This is where like we can't. And so I'm sure all of us have hit that at some point in our lives, whether we wanted to or not, where it's like, I just can't. I just need to get in bed and I have no motivation. And you might know, like this happens to me with little children. at least a couple times a month. I'm like, I can't. Like, I got to go to bed at 7 tonight and sleep for like 11 hours because and then next morning I wake up and I can again, you know. Sometimes we just have to know when we're going in, our body's about to go into like that shutdown energy conservation, like I've done too much and I need to recover. In other cases, we hit that and we kind of get stuck in it. And that's part of somatic therapy, is helping to not get stuck in these places. But it is very normal to feel into or to land in these places in the nervous system. So freeze is happening because it's a last ditch effort for survival. This is where animals play dead. For humans, that does kind of happen. There's functional neurological disorder, used to be called conversion disorder. I've had some clients with that where the body just goes, parts or a lot of the body gets paralyzed. So it's like the nervous system is like, we're literally not going to let you get out of bed. And there's no medical reason for it. So it is most likely the system just going into a dorsal vagal response. For what reason, we have to kind of figure out. But that's what's happening. Emotionally, we might feel helpless, shame, shutdown. This is where suicidal ideation usually happens. Maybe a feeling of being trapped. Um, we have a raised pain threshold because also we start to feel numb. So another way that one might know that they're here is because they feel like just not motivated or excited. You know, even if it doesn't feel like full out depression, it feels like I just don't care about anything really. Like it's hard to get excited or motivated about my life. And when we talk about how we feel in the body, it's like nothing. Like, I don't know. I don't really feel my body that much. So there's some dissociation or numbness um, going on. And then we can look over to the right too with this red area. It's different from the green. There's more endorphins that are going to raise the pain threshold and help with kind of numbing the body. There's a conservation of metabolic resources, so digestion is going to be slower. Decreased heart rate, decreased blood pressure, temperature drops. Sometimes people feel cold or really like almost dizzy when they stand up because their blood pressure is too low. Um, we want to be by ourselves. It's a place where social isolation happens often, kind of withdrawing from friends and family. And again, this can be like a needed thing to do, to go, I need a whole day to go be by myself and relax and get out in nature and sleep a lot, right? It can be a healthy thing to identify that there's some dorsal vagal coming online and we need to honor that. It can also be a place we get stuck and it feels very scary and isolated. Okay, talked pretty well about that. Um, I took a picture of this just to show you that when ventral vagal is mostly overseeing the system, then all of these places we can kind of navigate through them. And we're going to be able to navigate the world with more safety and flexibility. And flexibility is a big word because like I said, we're going to all have stress happen. It's more about being able to ride the wave and continue to come back to ventral vagal, right? Like I can come back to it and then I can be in my activation a little bit and work through that and let it move and then resettle. And that's the goal really of somatic therapy. If the sympathetic nervous system takes over and we're kind of stuck there, we are not going to have access to the ventral vagal and we'll be more in that sympathetic state, possibly going into some checkout. And dorsal vagal, it's just like we're kind of fully in that shutdown mode. One thing I can say with this is that we're all wired by nature kind of individually. And I thought it was fascinating. I was learning about all of this probably when my kids were pretty little. And so I'm going to use them as examples because they totally came out wired their own way. And I've felt like with knowing some of this, it's interesting to deal with them each and parent them each as best as I can a little bit differently. Um, So my oldest, he's he's an extrovert, so he has a lot of capacity for the world. He can be with people a lot and not get run down. He likes to be social, but he's very steady. He's not like a nervous kid. He's just and it's partly the extrovert part, but he's got a lot of capacity, likes to be out doing stuff. So he will sort of probably go more to, and he's more parasympathetic and relaxed in his body. um he won't go into sympathetic activation very much. Like, he doesn't, if he gets stressed or upset, he'll sort of check out and then he has to come rejoin. So he doesn't have a lot of capacity for the yellow. I'll go back to this chart. He doesn't have a lot of capacity for the yellow. Some people don't really like that. There's a lot of sensation in there. Like, it doesn't feel good to feel mad and angry. It doesn't feel good to be worried. It's just not where their system goes. And people in your lives like this, they feel really relaxed a lot of the time. I've noticed just living with him and being his mom that when he does get, he'll freeze. Like, if he thinks he's in trouble, it's sort of like, oh, and then he kind of just needs to, he might shut down and cry, and then he just wants to go be by himself. And then once he recovers, he'll come back and be around everybody. But that, it's like he's going through the yellow, but he goes through it really fast and checks out. Then my middle one is very dorsal vagal. He's like in very relaxed, and sometimes will go to, uh if he's an introvert. So this can go back to personality type 2 a little bit. He's an introvert and needs a lot of downtime. And so when he has that time, he's in the green quite a bit. But he'll go into hyperness, right? And be in that yellow quite a bit longer than his older brother. Um, but if he's too overwhelmed by life and the world and school, he'll kind of head into like, I just need to kind of shut down and check out. Then my littlest one is like all yellow. Like, she can be in the green or she's in the yellow. She never goes into the red. I see a lot of clients like that too, where they're like, oh yeah, I never really give up. Like, I never really check out. But their body has a lot of capacity to be in the yellow. And it can wear out too and end up turning into, too much inflammation or physical symptoms or getting sick or things like that. But their system, it's just a name, has a lot of capacity to be in activation. They could like live there all day. So there is some wiring to this that's kind of like, it's just how we are. So it's more learning about our nervous systems and learning about what we need and being able to kind of ride the wave of our own system. So hopefully I've explained pretty well the difference between somatic therapy versus talk therapy. I want to take the rest of the time to kind of takeaways with this, like how can we use this? And maybe when you leave the class today, you have a few tools. Part of this might be just noticing the difference of how you feel with different people, or bringing your body into the conversation a little bit. When you like, when you walk in a new space, how does the room feel? If you go to sit on your couch later today, what would you change about it? Does it make you feel comfortable? Do you want your legs up? Do you want a blanket? How's the temperature? And just noticing how your body feels a little bit more instead of being up in our thoughts all the time. Um, I'm going to go to the next slide here. I often, in somatic experiencing, there's an acronym called SIBAM. And so this is something you can go through for yourself and say, okay, what's the sensation I feel in my body? And I can ask you right now, just as you listen to this class, like, do you feel your feet? Do you feel anything in your gut? What do you feel through your shoulders or your neck? How warm are you? How cold are you? So sensation is the way that our body feels. Sometimes when somebody's telling me something stressful, they might say, my chest feels tight, or I feel like and we might get really detailed about it. Like, oh, it feels like there's a ball in there and it's really hard or it's pokey or it's jittery, or I feel like my throat feels tight. Like there's something I swallowed and it's stuck there. So those are all sensations. Image is like, the picture in my mind? What do I see? What comes up for me? When I imagine the beach, what sensations do I notice in my body? Or the mountains? If I picture that in my mind, that would be the image. Behavior is actually what we do. So, for example, like affect is emotion. So, if we have sadness, we feel sadness, the behavior might be crying. Meaning is what we talked about with the cortex, like all of the stuff that we um, think about in the story. So, what's the story? So, in talk therapy, we're more focused on meaning, affect, and behavior. What is the story? What happened? How do I feel about it? And then, like, what are the things I do based on this or I did? In somatic therapy, we pull in the other two and combine them all. So, what's happening in my body when I talk about this thing? When I go through this story, what do I feel? And we slow it down quite a bit because sometimes our body remembers it in a way that our cortex doesn't. And we can get more information. We can work through it um, in some other ways. And this image here with SciBam is just showing that they're all connected. Every sensation is connected to, is also connected to an emotion, but we may not notice the sensation when we feel the emotion. So just asking yourself these questions can create more mind body awareness and maybe lead you to some new things to do that would help with whatever the moment needs. The pendulation. So in somatic experiencing, we talk about like the trauma vortex. So if you've gotten like stressed about something and you feel yourself just kind of get carried off in worrying about it or ruminating about it, that would be the trauma vortex. And it is like a tornado because that is survival. We need to notice the negative stuff. We need to see that the car pulled in front of us. We need to see the negative because that's what keeps us safe. Our brain is wired to make sure that happens so we can stay alive. We don't necessarily need to smell the roses or feel pleasure, joy, all of that to stay alive. So sometimes we just forget to do it, especially in a fast paced world. So this is this age old phrase, but it applies here, right? Where do you feel the good stuff? So when you feel relaxed, I often hear this. So what does that feel like in your body? And somebody says, oh, it's like the absence of the other sensation. So the bad stuff is gone. I don't really know what this is. I just know that's gone. But what is this actually? I bet there's a sensation associated with it. It's just more subtle. And so when you feel good, this is an invitation to notice, like, what does it feel like in my body when I'm with my friend that just makes me feel really good? What is that feeling? And can I sit with it and enjoy it and get more attuned to that? So that just like I remember the bad stuff, I'll remember how to get back to the good stuff. So that's called the counter vortex. And if we are able to swing between the two, we can be more resilient. And we do this with our language a lot, right? Oh, I was on that plane flying to my vacation, and then we were stuck on the runway for like 3 hours. It was horrible. It was hot. I was so stressed that we weren't going to get there. But then we got there, and the feeling of the sand on my feet was so great. I had such a good time. That's the trauma vortex and the counter vortex. And if we're able to go between the two and not get stuck in, that was so awful, then we have a bit more resilience usually. It's okay when we get stuck. We all get stuck. But this is just also the invitation when it's accessible to pendulate. And then we learn to ride the wave and have flexibility. So, some things you can do at home, tracking and orientation is, you can raise your hand for fun if you want, but who here has a pet? Dog, cat? Yeah. They do this all day. They look back and forth and they check out their environment. And then when they see a threat, they stop and they bark or whatever, hiss. And eventually they resettle. You see their body relax and they go back to tracking and orientation. And even just turning your head like that will tell your body that you're in a safe environment. It's like a trick. It triggers the vagal nerve and brings on some parasympathetic response. So if you're stressed at work or at home or wherever, get up, step outside. It's getting nice out now, so it's easier to do. Step outside and just like really look around and let your neck move, look at the trees, check out the colors. You might next say, how do I feel in my body when I do that? What do I notice? And you might notice, if you notice a little bit of relaxation, then enjoy that and notice what that feels like. And you'll, over time, be able to connect to that more and more, most likely. Then there's the pleasure exercise. And so that just has to do with noticing the counter vortex, noticing the good stuff. What things feel good in my body? And can I notice that and enjoy it? And also remember it. I remember when I first was like introduced to that, my kids were really little and their cheek, like that's the softest little chubby cheeks, right? And I would probably hug them and be like, oh, that feels good. And then move on to like, gotta get dinner ready or whatever. But I started like really like, oh, just like feeling the feeling of their cheek against my cheek. And I could like, if I really gave it some time and like hugged them and just enjoyed it, I could feel my whole body like melt. And it felt so good. And it was a shift from the day too. It was nice, right? That's the parasympathetic system coming on, some oxytocin. I'm in my ventral vagal state, more present with my family, all just from noticing this like one sensation on my cheek. So that's kind of something you can play with too. It's like, what are the things that bring me pleasure? It could be visual pleasure, it could be felt sense, it can be a smell, like your coffee in the morning and sitting and relaxing and thinking about life while you drink it. Whatever it is, enjoy it and kind of notice what else happens when you enjoy it. 4-7-8 breathing is inhale for 4, hold for 7, exhale for 8. And I just wrote here, let it be easy. Sometimes I think we go into like mindfulness practices and we're not actually letting our system relax. It's like, oh, I have to do this thing and I'm still kind of bracing through it. So the idea would be like, whatever kind of breathing you do, settle into it. Like, let it be easy. Feel the deep breath, feel like the ease of it. That would be the initial goal. But 4-7-8 is one that I often throw out. It has some good research behind it for helping the body, after 3 minutes of doing it, shift into a parasympathetic state. And then you can use that CYBAM model just to notice where you feel things, what pictures come to mind, like just to kind of be more connected to all parts of your brain, whether it's during a more activating moment or it's during a more like relaxing or pleasurable moment. So hopefully you got some takeaways. I'm going to look and see if there's questions. We have a few minutes for that.
There's a question on if this somatic therapy can be done along with CBT.
Yeah. So you can do somatic therapy and be doing CBT with 2 different practitioners. Some people will come and this happens for some reason, maybe it's common, I don't know, but in my practice, I'll get people who've done a lot of CBT or talk therapy and they feel like, okay, now I have like all this insight and I want to kind of connect it more to my body awareness. So you can kind of do one, the other, go back and forth. But yeah, it is.
Can I ask what CBT is?
Cognitive behavioral therapy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so
unlike CBD.
yes.
And also somebody said if the somatic therapy is covered by insurance, and I just said to check with their insurance.
Yeah, there are somatic therapists that take insurance. I'm circling back to thinking about that now that I have a different license to kind of see what that would look like. So I don't currently, but I might. There are therapists that it's just finding someone that takes your insurance, but there are, yeah, somatic, it is covered. It's just all about our license. So if we're a licensed counselor and you're looking for counseling and that counselor does somatic work, then it should be covered.
All right. Thank you very much. And just a reminder, on the 25th, we have Brooke back, and she will be talking to us about gluten, kind of the mysteries of gluten and why or why not. All right. Well, thank you very much, Brooke, and see everyone on the 25th. Thank you.
Thank you.